Hi, I'm Joseph Say, and welcome to History Tidbits on theplatypuses.com. I'm at the Houston Space Center. Behind me is a mock-up of the shuttle trainer, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of history behind Johnson Space Center. It was founded, or started, in about 1961, and it has a long history going back to kind of Cold War era tensions after World War II. The whole reason for the American space program is basically to compete against the Russians in developing rockets that could carry men and weapons, possibly, into space. Germany started the initial rocket programs during World War II, and it was their scientists that helped both the Soviet Union and the United States in developing their own space programs. It was the launch of Sputnik 2 by the Soviet Union in 1957 that really kind of prompted the United States to get more heavily involved in the space race. Not that they weren't really committed, but it was a warning message because that was the first man-made object in space, first satellite, and really inspired the United States to be more creative. In 1958, NASA newly christened that, set up a space task group to explore manned spaceflight to one-up the Soviet Union. That was the beginning of the Mercury project, and Alan Shepard would be the culmination of that project in being the first man to be launched into outer space. A really exciting time in the United States, a sense of extreme pride because of the space program. On May 25th, 1961, President Kennedy gave his famous speech basically saying that the United States would have a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And that started the search for a manned spaceflight center throughout the country, a place where they could develop the technologies and put in the infrastructure to control the missions. Of course, Florida had been the site of the initial space launches for the Mercury project. On September 16, 1961, Houston was selected as the site for the Manned Space Center. And this would eventually be called Johnson Space Center because President Johnson, at that time Vice President Johnson, had a heavy influence on selecting of Houston for the Space Center. It had a great port, the Port of Houston. One of the requirements was that the port to move materials back and forth, these large rockets, to Florida would have to be ice-free throughout the year. And what better place than Houston, which at the time was the sixth largest city in America. The Saturn V program was a brainchild of German scientist von Braun, who actually helped develop the V-2 rockets in Germany that were so devastating to England during the Second World War. Came over to the United States and was heavily involved in our space program. He was the father of the Saturn V rockets, which are and remain the most powerful rocket engines ever developed by mankind. And that's how we got to the moon, and we have not replicated that technology. We are, of course, working on new rocket engines to hopefully take us to Mars someday. But all of this is built upon the technology that the Germans initially pioneered for warfare in World War II. The other mission of NASA is to go ahead and increase the allure and appeal of space and exploration to young adults. One way of doing this is by having displays such as the unveiling of the shuttlecraft Galileo from the original Star Trek series. Here is the unveiling that occurred on July 31st, 2013.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give another round of applause for Adam Snyder for bringing this beautiful ship to life.
We're used to it being surrounded by smoke and on fire. This is great.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes